The laughter died before I could. Tara's face dropped first, wine glass halfway to her lips. Lindsay froze like someone had hit pause on her life. Wait, was that? I grabbed my phone. The screen burned into my palm. Carl, 8:03:17, ongoing. Oh no, oh no, no, no. My thumb slammed the red button. Too late. Damage already done. Tara whispered like it might change the laws of physics. Was he listening the whole time? I don't know. My voice cracked, thin as paper. He said my name. Lindsay reached over, touched my shoulder gently like she was trying to keep me from falling through the floor. What exactly did you say right before that? And there it was. The question. The guillotine. I saw the whole conversation reel backward like security footage. Keg jokes, lazy husband jabs, and the one sentence that hadn't felt like a joke even as I said it. If someone better came along, I might not say no. Had he heard that part? Had he heard all of it? I felt like I was underwater, like my own house was choking me. The rain tapped the windows harder now. Every drop sounded like a verdict. I didn't mean it, I said, mostly to myself. I mean, I did, but not like that. Tara didn't respond. Her silence said enough. Somewhere in the quiet, I realized my hands were trembling. My whole body, actually. The room was too still, too loud, too full of things I couldn't take back. What was I supposed to do? Call him back? Pretend it didn't happen? Toss the phone out the window and follow it? Lindsay looked at me, eyes narrowed. Do you want to fix this? Or are you more afraid of what comes next? That landed deep. Too deep. Because what came next wasn't just an apology. It was a reckoning. And I wasn't ready. Not for Carl. And definitely not for the truth. I stood in the hallway gripping the phone like it might bite. The call had ended hours ago. But it hadn't really ended, had it? My voice echoed in my head. All those words, the ones that weren't supposed to leave the room, now floating somewhere between his silence and my guilt. I need to call him, I said again, barely audible. No one answered. Tara had retreated to the kitchen, pretending to busy herself with dishes we hadn't used. Lindsay was scrolling aimlessly, the screen lighting her face like a spotlight on someone trying not to care too much. When I finally hit dial, my fingers shook so badly I nearly dropped the phone. Voicemail. The second time, the same. The third time, he answered. No hello, just air, and then, I heard what you said. It wasn't angry. That would have been easier. It was empty, like something had already been taken out of him. My breath caught. Carl, wait, Don't explain. I heard it all. A pause, long enough to sink me. I was just venting. It wasn't... I couldn't finish. Even I didn't believe myself. His voice was quiet, almost clinical. You said if someone better came along, you might. I closed my eyes. My knees nearly gave. I wanted to lie. Needed to. It was a joke, I whispered, already knowing how it sounded. I was trying to sound, I don't know, funny. It was the wine and the girls and... That's worse. His breath trembled at the end. You humiliated me for laughs. The silence after that was the kind that rattles in your bones. The kind that doesn't end with an apology. Because it's not about the words anymore. It's about what the words revealed. He still didn't know everything. There had been someone. It was months ago. Nothing happened. Not really. But I'd thought about it. I'd wanted to be wanted by someone who wasn't tired all the time, who looked at me like I still mattered. Carl never suspected. But now he had reason to. And that terrified me more than anything he could say. I didn't mean for you to hear it, I said, voice cracking. That's the part that hurts the most, he replied. You didn't mean for me to hear it, but you still meant it. I said nothing, because I couldn't argue with that. It had been over a year, but his name still sat near the top of my contacts, like a stone I refused to skip. Oliver. I didn't plan to remember his cologne. I didn't mean to recall how his hand brushed mine when he passed the wine at the firm's Christmas party, or how he leaned in too close during small talk that didn't need whispering. But I did. Carl had dropped me off that night. He was tired. Said he'd skip the event, but to have fun. I remembered how I'd smiled too quickly and said, "Of course," like I was grateful for the freedom. At the bar, the music had dulled to background noise. Oliver had leaned in, voice low. "You always look like you're halfway somewhere else." I hadn't known what he meant. Maybe I had. And maybe that's why I didn't pull away when he didn't move. Maybe that's why I laughed too long at his jokes. Why my shoulder brushed his more than once. At the time, I told myself it was harmless. The coffee was worse. It happened a week later. In broad daylight. No wine. No excuse. He texted, "If I said I wish you'd stayed after, would that be weird?" I didn't reply for hours. But I didn't delete it either. When I finally wrote back, all I said was, "It's not weird." The next message came instantly. "Coffee tomorrow?" We sat at a quiet table by the window. He talked about deadlines and corporate mergers. I nodded like I was listening, but my heart was somewhere between guilt and a fantasy I knew better than to believe. He never touched me, never kissed me. But there was a moment, one breath too long, one pause too loaded, when our knees brushed under the table, and neither of us moved. That was it. We never met again. He never pushed. I never told Carl, because I didn't think it mattered. And maybe it didn't. Until last night. When Carl's voice through the phone made me feel the same way I felt walking away from that cafe, exposed, unsteady, unclean. That night, after the call, I couldn't sleep. I sat on the cold bathroom tile, the light too sharp, the air too still. My phone felt heavier than usual. When I opened my contacts and saw Oliver's name still saved, I didn't call, didn't text. I just stared. What was I waiting for? A message from him? A sign that what we had wasn't just my imagination? Or was I hoping I could pin all of this, the call, the collapse, on that one quiet moment with a man who smiled too softly? I told myself it hadn't been an affair, but the way my hand shook when I hovered over delete contact told a different story. Somewhere inside me, I knew the truth. I'd been waiting for an excuse. I blamed Carl for pulling away, for shutting down, for turning into someone I could vent about over wine. But I never really asked him why. I just let the distance grow, and when Oliver filled the space with charm and attention, I didn't close the door. I left it cracked, just enough to breathe in something that didn't smell like resentment. I deleted the contact. Then I opened my messages. Nothing from Carl. But I scrolled anyway, past the grocery lists and old memes, until I found the first thread with Oliver, the one with the cafe invite. I read it twice. Then I stared at the blank reply box beneath it. My thumb hovered. Just coffee. But I never told Carl. The sentence looped through my head like a drumbeat. I pressed my palm flat against the mirror. It felt colder than the tile. My reflection didn't flinch, but I did. Why didn't I delete him sooner? Why did I keep the thread, the name, the possibility? Because part of me wanted to prove I still could, that someone still noticed, that I wasn't invisible. But what I never asked myself, not until now, was this. Why did I need someone else to prove I mattered at all? I thought Carl had failed me. But what if I was the one who gave up first? What if I stopped trying before he did? What if Oliver was never the problem, just the symptom? Outside the bathroom door, the house creaked. It used to feel like home. Now it sounded like a warning. I sat on the floor until the sun began to seep through the edges of the blinds, and when I finally stood up, I wasn't sure if I was coming clean or just running out of ways to lie. The silence in the house wasn't just quiet. It was deliberate, like someone had vacuumed all the sound out of the air. The kind of silence that made you hear yourself breathe, and then hate the sound of it. I rolled over and reached instinctively for the warmth that used to live beside me. Nothing but cool, stretched sheets. Carl's pillow still held the faintest dent. A trace. That's all he left. My hand stayed there too long, as if I could press down hard enough to rewind time. I got up, wrapped myself in the old hoodie that still smelled like lavender and nights spent watching documentaries we barely paid attention to, forced myself into the routine. Coffee, news headlines I didn't read, mindless scrolling. And then I noticed the hook by the back door, empty. The leash, gone. No sound of Max padding around, no slow tail thump against the wall. That brittle laugh escaped me before I could stop it. Oh, he took the dog. At first, it was absurd, like some poorly written breakup scene in a sitcom. He took the dog. Who does that? But then I saw the note. Folded once, no envelope, tucked neatly beneath the bowl of fruit neither of us had touched in days. One line, scrawled in his neat, all-caps handwriting that always looked like it belonged on a whiteboard. I need someone who doesn't flinch when I walk into the room. I read it once, then again. The words didn't blur. They sharpened. My legs gave before the tears did. I slid to the floor, knees to chest, and pressed my forehead against the cabinet like the cold would ground me. Max wasn't just a dog. He was the only living thing that had seen us both at our worst and still stayed close. We got him after the miscarriage, a quiet, mutual decision wrapped in sterile words and delayed emotions. Carl hadn't spoken for 3 days afterward. I hadn't cried. We didn't talk about it. We walked the grief instead. 3 blocks every evening, with Max sniffing curbs like the world still made sense. Carl fed him. I bathed him. Max became the heartbeat between us when ours fell out of sync. And now he was gone. With Carl. With the man who used to curl his hand over mine in the dark when neither of us knew what to say. The man who didn't even raise his voice when he heard me say the ugliest things. He just left. And somehow, that hurt more. The doorbell rang. I startled, half hoping, half dreading. But when I opened it, it wasn't Carl. It was Lindsay, holding 2 coffees and a hesitant smile. I thought you might need caffeine, and a non-judgmental face. I stepped aside without a word. She walked in like someone entering a museum after hours. Quiet, careful. So, no Carl? I shook my head. He took Max. Oh, she said softly, lowering the coffees onto the counter. That's... wow. I handed her the note. She read it without comment. Then, quietly, he's right, though. You do flinch when he walks in. I looked up. What's that supposed to mean? You flinch, she repeated, not unkindly. Not because you're scared, but because you're carrying guilt like it's going to spill out if anyone breathes too loud. The silence between us stretched. I didn't think I'd hurt him like that, I said. You didn't think. Period. She wasn't being cruel, just accurate. We sat in the kitchen, the dog bowl still full by the wall, the leash hook empty. And for the first time in days, I stopped defending myself. Because maybe I had been flinching. Not from Carl, from everything I hadn't said. From the grief we buried in long walks. From the weight of a dog collar that still hung in the closet with his old raincoat. And maybe, just maybe, from the person I'd become when I stopped asking if he was hurting too. The house wasn't just empty, it was echoing. And I finally understood why. It came in just after midnight, that hour where your thoughts get louder and your phone feels heavier in your hand. A text, unknown number. You don't know me, but I used to be with Carl, before you. I stared at it, thumb hovering over delete. My first instinct was denial. Spam? Someone fishing for drama? But something about the simplicity of it, the lack of punctuation, the breathless honesty, it felt real. I tapped, opened. He does this, withdraws, makes you feel like you're the only broken one. When we were together, I begged for attention. Then one night, I snapped, called him selfish in front of friends. Next day, he packed and left, told everyone I was unstable. I sat up straighter, heart starting to pound. Her name came in the next message. Alyssa. I remembered it. Barely. Someone he'd dated long ago, before me. Mentioned once, maybe twice. Brushed off with a shrug and a half smile. Didn't end well, he'd said. She wasn't well. That's what I remembered. That exact phrasing. She wasn't well. And now she was here, in my phone, telling me her side of the story. I didn't know whether to respond, to ask her for more, to block her, but I couldn't stop reading. He makes you think the silence is your fault. He won't yell, he won't accuse, he'll just shut down until you start spinning, and when you finally explode, he leaves. And suddenly, you're the one who needs therapy. My mouth was dry. Hadn't I just lived that scene? Hadn't I just felt the unraveling, the quietness that made me second-guess my worth, my sanity? It wasn't that Carl had screamed or insulted me. He didn't have to. He disappeared piece by piece until all that was left was a reflection of my own frustration. And when I broke, when the wine and bitterness spilled out in front of my friends, he didn't argue. He just left. Took the dog, took the air from the house. But had he really left? Or had he been preparing to? Was this the end for him? Or the ending he always knew how to orchestrate? The next message came minutes later. I thought I was alone. I thought it was me. But it's always the same script with him. He'll never be the bad guy. You will. And you'll start believing it. I dropped the phone on the comforter and pressed my palms to my face. Was that what was happening? Had I fallen for a quiet trap, not because Carl screamed, but because he never did? Because the silence became the accusation? A memory flashed. Our 3rd year together, a stupid argument over groceries. I'd forgotten something, or maybe bought the wrong brand. He didn't say anything, just stared at the receipt like it was a stranger's handwriting. I'd apologized 3 times before realizing he never asked for one. And now I wondered, how many of those apologies over the years were for things I never fully understood? I picked up the phone again, typed, deleted, typed again. Why are you telling me this? Seconds passed. Then, because I know what it's like to wonder if you're the problem, and I wish someone had told me I wasn't. I didn't reply after that. I didn't know how. But I didn't delete the thread either. I read it again at 3:12 a.m., lying on my back in the dark, replaying every silent moment between me and Carl that I'd brushed off as maturity or fatigue or restraint. Maybe it wasn't restraint. Maybe it was strategy. Maybe he didn't raise his voice because he didn't need to, because letting me fill the silence with guilt was cleaner. Because in the end, if I'm the one who says the awful thing, if I'm the one who jokes about leaving, if I'm the one who's caught, then he gets to walk away untouched, innocent, victimized. And suddenly, I wasn't so sure I was the only one hiding something. Was Carl just heartbroken? Or was he a master at standing still while I self-destructed? A knock on the door made me jump. I pulled on my robe, padded barefoot down the hall, heart in my throat. But it wasn't Carl. It was a delivery driver. A plain box in his hands. I signed, closed the door. No note inside. Just an empty dog bowl. Max's. I stared at it for a long time, then sat on the floor beside it. Maybe Alyssa was wrong. Maybe Carl really was just hurt. Just tired. Just done. But what if she wasn't? And what if I hadn't just lost my marriage? What if I'd walked straight into a pattern I didn't know existed? I didn't sleep that night. I just sat there with the bowl between my hands, trying to decide if it was a reminder of what I broke, or what was never really mine to hold in the first place. I stared at the phone long after the call ended, the screen dimming into a black mirror that showed me a version of myself I didn't recognize. Chin tight, mouth slightly open, like I was still expecting her voice to come back. To take it back. But the line was dead. She had hung up. She used to call me her sister, the kind that didn't need blood. We'd once shared a blanket and ice cream after Carl's work trip got extended. Binge-watched bad dramas and whispered about our childhoods like it was sacred currency. We'd laughed so hard we cried at my wedding shower. She helped me pick out the shoes, and now she was the one holding the knife. 3 days. That's how long I'd waited to call. I told myself it was to give Carl space. But deep down, I think I waited because I needed to believe that someone in his life still saw me. The version of me that existed before the meltdown, before the venting, before the voicemail I never meant to record. She answered on the second ring. Hello? It was flat, unreadable. I didn't know what I expected. Warmth, maybe. Concern, the awkward edge of empathy. Hey, I don't even know what to say, I admitted, trying not to let my voice crack. A pause. I know, Mallory. Something in the way she said it made my stomach twist. You know what? Another pause. Longer this time. Then she exhaled, and the sound of it hit me harder than words. About Oliver, Carl told us everything. It felt like a door slammed shut inside my chest. He told you? He's hurting, she said, still calm, still terrifyingly composed. You made sure of that. I couldn't breathe. It wasn't an affair. Not really. I mean, it was just coffee. You entertained someone else while married to my brother. You hid it. And then you mocked him in front of your friends like he wasn't even in the room. But he was, wasn't he? I felt myself shrinking, like her words physically reduced me. You don't understand. We've both been unhappy. I said terrible things, yes, but he wasn't. He stopped trying, too. She cut me off. Carl deserves better. Silence. And frankly, she added, her voice now edged with something icy and final, we're done picking up your messes. Then came the click. A full, undeniable, deliberate click. I didn't cry. Not right away. I just stood there, the phone still pressed to my ear like it might fill the room with noise again, like her voice might come back and offer some sort of lifeline. But all I heard was the distant hum of the fridge and my own heart pounding like it wanted to run. Then the silence sank in. She wasn't just defending her brother. She was rewriting me. Suddenly, I was the villain in a story they could all retell over dinner. She embarrassed him. She lied. She crossed a line. They didn't see the nights I stayed up folding his laundry while he sat silent on the couch. They didn't hear the conversations that ended before they began. They didn't see me. Not anymore. I was being erased. Not just from his life. From the life I thought I had helped build. The photos on their fridge, the group texts I used to be part of, the little traditions, Friday calls, Sunday brunches, holiday gifting. I was vanishing from all of it. And the worst part? They weren't even hesitating. I walked back to the kitchen, pushed aside the unopened mail, picked up a spoon and stirred a cup of tea that had gone cold hours ago. Max's bowl was still by the door. I hadn't moved it. I should have. I should have picked it up, put it away, washed it. Something. But I didn't, because it was the last thing that made this house feel like it still remembered Carl, like I hadn't dreamed the whole life we shared. Now even the memories felt suspicious. What else had I gotten wrong? Was I the only one rewriting things? Or had they always had a version of me in the background, waiting to prove me wrong? I wasn't just losing a husband. I was losing witnesses to who I thought I was. People who had seen me laugh, cry, cook, grow. And now they looked at that same woman and said, "You're the reason he left." Click. One syllable, one sound. And it spoke louder than anything I could have said in my defense. The bowl hadn't moved. Still there in its corner, untouched, like a question I refused to answer. I crouched beside it, fingers brushing the rim, half expecting warmth, something to remind me we'd once been a home. The silence pressed in. No claws on tile, no familiar snuffle, just absence that knew my name. I didn't think it would fall apart this fast, I whispered, to no one, or maybe to myself. The dark felt safer than light, easier to sit in shadows than face the glare of what I'd done. I could have blamed Carl for leaving without a fight, for not asking why, for watching me drift and doing nothing to stop it. I could have blamed Oliver for that lingering gaze, for texting when I needed distraction most, for being temptation in a tailored coat. And maybe Alyssa too, for the mirror she held up to me, the one I couldn't unsee. But none of them put the words in my mouth that night. If someone better came along, I might not say no. I did that. And the worst part? Somewhere deep down, I meant it. Not because I stopped loving Carl, but because I stopped seeing myself, stopped asking what I needed, and started expecting someone else to fill the silence inside me. That was never his job. It was mine. 3 weeks. That's how long it's been since Carl vanished from my life in anything but paperwork. Now it's a lawyer who speaks for him. Polite, sterile words dressed in legal jargon. He's requesting mediation. He'd prefer to keep the dog. No emotion, no warmth, no trace of the man who once whispered goodnight into my hair. Last night, Max showed up on my feed. Someone must have tagged the park. There he was, tongue out, fur gleaming, looking up at the sky like he'd never known tension. I tapped the heart icon before I realized my hand had moved. Then the tears came. Quiet ones, the kind that don't need sound to hollow you out. Tara still texts, once in a while. But we both know something's broken there too. Every glance from her feels like a reminder. You said those things, out loud, in front of me. She saw a version of me I never meant to preserve, and I can't ask her to unsee it. I go to therapy now, not to fix Carl, not to win him back, but because somewhere along the way, I stopped recognizing my own reflection. I used to think being honest meant being raw, sharp, cutting. But now I wonder, what if real honesty is learning how to be soft again? What if the first person I truly betrayed was the version of me who believed love was something you protect, not test? I'm trying to find her again. The woman who knew how to love gently, without the armor, without the noise. Maybe that's what grace really is. Not forgiveness from someone else, but remembering who you were before you forgot how to be kind.